Okay, guys and gals, today I'm with Jim Anderson here, and you guys know we're doing these boat buying series. We're going to call this episode 5, I believe. I could be wrong on that. It could be 6.
I think we lost track.
Yeah, I think we did. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy it, because today this is something that came up, and it's going to come up in these 40-year-old boats. Today we're staying, you've been staying on the Perfect 2 for a couple days now, 3 or 4 days.
Yep.
And she has, one of the advantages to her, she has a comfortable bed.
Yes, very comfortable bed.
But also, I've been helping Phil trying to find a leak in the boat. So I've been around his fuel tanks on this particular boat. And believe it or not, the tanks in here look pretty damn good. Like
How old is this boat?
This is a 1974, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
And the fuel tanks still look good.
Yeah, I wouldn't be 100% convinced that these may have been replaced, but we wouldn't know that. You know, we'd have to get into a lot of the details because it's hard to believe that these tanks are 50 years old.
It'd be pretty complicated to get the tanks out of a boat like this, I would imagine.
Yeah, so that's what I don't think a lot of people realize. You know, there's not a lot of options for the fuel tanks. But you have reached out to a vendor and asked on a specific boat, which is a 36-gram Banks, what it costs to replace the fuel tanks in there.
Yeah, I was considering a 36 Grand Banks, and after I had the survey done, I realized that the tanks are probably going to have to be replaced probably sometime between now and maybe 5 years from now. So one of the things that I did is I reached out to one of the premier Grand Banks brokers and on the East Coast, and had probably an hour and a half conversation with him.
Okay.
And was kind of wondering how much would it cost, to pull out the fuel tanks and then replace them with new ones. You and I were we're talking about that, and we thought maybe it would be about 10,000 or something like that.
Well, yeah, you're right. But the more I got to thinking about it, that's the price of the tanks, which.
Well, we were also talking about that, and we were guessing.
Yeah,
and the advice you were giving me is you got to call this guy and you got to find out exactly what it would be.
Because
I was shocked when I found out.
Yeah, because it's just like anything else. It's do your due diligence. It doesn't matter if you're buying a stock or crypto or buying a boat.
Yeah.
You want to know what this thing could potentially cost you.
So what's involved in pulling out tanks on a boat like the 36 is, number one, the good news is if you have a single engine, that it's a little less complicated, but it's a lot more complicated if you have twins, number one. But I mean, what they literally have to do is go in there with sawzalls and cut those tanks out. And then while they're there, they have to do all kinds of other work that you may as well do while you're there.
And this is on a single engine.
And that's on a single engine. But they at a minimum they have to pull out the generator, and then they have to cut the tanks out and then get them out through the existing door that you have.
Because I don't think a lot of people realize that you're not just pulling even if somehow you pulled the motors, pulled the generator, pulled everything out of there, you're still, and you had room to get it out of the hull. You can't get it out the door.
Right.
So the tank, and you can't get the new tanks back in, because I think when they build these boats, they build the hull. Yeah. Then the tanks go into the hull. I don't know if you realize that. Yep. And then they strap.
And then they build around it.
Yeah. Then they put the finishing touches to put after they get the hull done. They put the top cap on. Yeah. Which is the superstructure. They set that on there, and then they mold that all together with that's what that strap is, goes around the boats.
But the way they normally handle it is they once you get those tanks out, then they have to manufacture new tanks, and I have two 150-gallon tanks, and those are so big that
I think they're actually 250.
Yeah, and so but the point is
200.
That it is 200. You're right. So the point is what they do is they split, instead of having 2 tanks, they have 4 tanks, because they can fit 4 tanks in, and then they link all the tanks together.
Yeah, and they can get them through the doors and stuff like that.
And they can get them through the doors, that's right.
So that's the correct way to do it.
Right.
Now, we've looked at quite a few boats, even the boats that you can put plastic tanks. There's a lot of options.
You were telling me that you saw a boat with plastic tanks? What's the problem with plastic tanks?
I think, like especially in a rough sea or something like that, especially those big tanks like that.
They slosh around?
Yeah, they'll slosh around, and then the plastic just rots, you know what I'm saying? So then I just never heard anything. It's one thing to have a 20-gallon tank, but when you're talking 200 gallons of fuel, nah, I can't. I'm not going to put 200-gallon plastic tanks. The big boys, Nordhavens, all the big boys, they're fiberglass tanks.
Oh, okay.
So that is the best tank. And then another thing you got to remember, Steel is affinity if it's taken care of properly.
Mm-hmm.
Aluminum is not. I don't know. A lot of people, they love the aluminum tanks, but the shelf life on a good quality 500 aluminum tank is about 20 years.
Okay.
Because they have the pores in there. Just a lot of people think fiberglass is waterproof. It's not. It's the gel coat that's waterproof. This is what makes Grand Bank such a great boat.
Okay.
Because I think they put a half-inch thick gel coat on there. You can buff out an old Grand Banks,
because of the thickness
of the gel coat, and that's why it keeps the moisture off. But what you got to remember is those decks on the top. I don't care what anybody says; those decks leak.
Yeah.
And so
and that's what causes the tanks to rust out. They
right.
rust out from the top, don't they?
Yeah, from the top, and then and then it causes damage and stuff like that.
But what I found is that the cost of the tanks themselves is $8,000 just to manufacture the tanks, and then you got to get them in, and then there's all kinds of other things that while you're down there, you may as well fix them while they're there, like cleaning up the engine room, painting it, and all that type of thing, and there's probably 300 hours they estimated of work that they have to do in order to get these tanks out and put the new tanks in. And 300 hours at $85 an hour, this total job is like $35,000. I was blown away when I heard that number.
Yeah, I don't. But again, you'd have a good quality boat. I wouldn't be afraid at the right price to do something like that.
Right.
There's two things that would have to happen to me is. For me, I would have to be able to, because this was in the Chesapeake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would have to be able to, the tanks that are in the boat would have to be able to get around to the Chesapeake and then be prepared to leave the boat there for 6 months to get that work done.
Right.
Even though it's only 300 hours, it's going to take them a while to get it done.
And the beauty of going to a place like that is they've done it a million times, and you want to have somebody who knows what they're doing to do a job like this.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So I'm lucky because Southern Estate had tanks replaced already in it.
So somebody had already done it.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I know this is horrible to say, and I'm not going to talk and dwell on this, but somebody removed all the teak decks off Southern Estate, and they replaced the fuel tanks, which are those are the big ticket items.
But if I recall what you were telling me about that earlier, they brought those fuel tanks out through the bottom of the boat. They cut the fiberglass out of the bottom of the boat and dropped it down.
Yes, correct.
And then they glassed it all back in again. And that was very interesting that you could even do that.
You're right. You wouldn't even think you could do that, but that's the only other option they have. If you want to get full-size tanks back in, that's the only way to get them in and out is you have to cut the hull, drop your hull. So that's been done in Southern Estate, and that's the way they did it. They cut the tanks out. You asked me, or I don't know if it was you or somebody asked me, can you see where they? And no, I can't see it.
That's how good a job they did.
Yeah, but the owner says he can see it. I talked to him about it, and but even when I go down into the engine room, I'm trying to look for signs of that, and I can't. But I can see how they do it. They hollow it out, so they're doing all the glass work from the outside. But still, you'd think I'd see a little line or something there from. But no, I can't.
It must have been done by a quality
shop. I don't know, but it was, and that's an option. We did not price that out, so we don't know what the price of that is. But I would still say the $8,000, you might be a little bit cheaper because there's two tanks there. So instead of $8,000, it might be $6,000.
Yeah.
And then that 300 hours, maybe it might cut to 200 hours. So maybe it's a $25,000 job, but remember your hull was cut and compromised and stuff like that.
So as you're thinking about buying one of these older trawlers, if you find out that it needs new tanks, you've got to factor that in. It doesn't mean that you don't do it,
right?
But you have to make sure that it's
you're going to
properly
have to have
reflected.
Time and money is and once it's done and it's done correctly. Those are your two basic options.
And it has to be properly reflected in the price.
Yeah, right.
That you pay.
Yeah, because I think one of the boats we looked at, that one that had the plastic tank, the $110,000, and you have plastic tanks, so we know your tanks weren't done correctly. That's all I need to know, about the boat. I'm not even going to go look at the boat.
That's right.
So you've already overpriced it by saying it's a Grand Banks, and then I know you put plastic tanks in it, so I know you.
Well, I mean, when you go back into some of the advice that you've given people in the past, I mean, one of the things that you said a long time ago is you walk into a boat and you smell diesel fuel, you turn around and walk out.
Yeah,
unless you're willing to do a job like this.
Well, no, it doesn't even matter then, because if the tanks were leaking in the boat, which that boat you were looking at,
embedded in the fiberglass.
It would be embedded in the fiberglass, and you'll never get that out of the hull. So a boat like you were looking at is fine, because there was no smell of diesel.
I got it.
So when you walk in the back of the boat, you don't want to smell diesel, and if you do, that's a signal that you got tank problems. And I've looked at and walked in some of these boats, and the guy says, "Yeah, that tank doesn't work, and this tank doesn't work, and that tank, So that.
See, this is one of the reasons why my biggest goal here was to just find a boat with the right bones, so that you don't have major things like this to worry about. The things that I have to worry about are cosmetic.
Yeah.
And the cosmetic things you can either do yourself or you can have it done with relatively small investment.
So anyway, I just wanted to talk about the fuel tank, so it just gives people their head wrapped around and have a price. I mean, that was a legitimate price for a 36 gram Banks, going to a 36 gram Banks dealer.
Yeah.
He used to sell these boats brand new. I think
right.
He sold the one you're looking at.
He did, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
I found that out in that conversation. He was a guy, I don't know how old he is, but he had a memory. He knew the hull number of that boat. It was an
that's
amazing
incredible.
Conversation.
Yeah. So anyway, and then and that company's done several of these conversions, so they know what to do it. And he was an interesting guy. I didn't catch the whole conversation, but I cut bits and pieces of it. So anyway, I just wanted you guys to hear that. Let's hear what you guys do for your. If anybody knows what the true price is to cut the hull out, drop the tanks, and put new tanks in, I want to hear that in the comments. Anybody else that's replaced their tanks, let's hear the prices that you've paid to replace your tanks, because I really do want to hear in the comments, so all of us know.
Yeah,
everybody.
I think we should get a conversation going in the comments, because anyone who's had any experience with these issues, I think it would be great for other people that are watching these videos to hear what other people have done,
so
and what experiences other people have had.
Yeah, so I think it's important to make sure you leave that comment down below, because I want to know what it on a. We're talking to these 40-year-old trawlers. It doesn't really matter. I don't care CHBs, GBs, or whatever. Just let's hear what your experience was, because there's a lot of guys will go in and cut these tanks out themselves, and so I want to hear, was it worth it or was it not?
It would be interesting to know people that have done it themselves, the DIYers, and how did you do it? And I'd be curious. Yeah.
Anyway, remember, I hope you guys like the video here. Share it with your friends, and leave a comment. And remember, live life with no regret. I do. And Jim, thank you so much.
I'm learning too.
Thank you so much for coming out this week, and it's been a joy. And I hope everything keeps moving forward with the GB you're looking at.
And I wanted to thank you for all the help that you've given me over this whole process. It's really been invaluable. The wisdom that you've imparted and the advice that you've given me has been invaluable to me. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. Anyway, remember, guys, live life with no regret. I do, and peace out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Bye.